Good evening, everyone. Yes, we have a very special evening guest today by the name of James Omolo, who is the author of The Beast, White Supremacy. And today we're going to have a little conversation with our brother. Lucky enough to have him here about what the experience is like for Black people in Europe, what that looks like on paper, and also what that can feel like in real life. So I'm going to bring James on, and we're going to get this conversation on the road. James, how you doing, brother? It's good to see you again, brother. It's very good to see you.
Good to see you. I missed the last episode, actually. Yeah, but eventually I'm here.
Absolutely. And that happens, man. It's hard to it's time, man. A lot of things are going on, and things happen all the time. But to be honest with you, it's worth the wait because and sometimes, as I was saying before in the back chat, brother, sometimes I forget, even myself, to clap myself on the back sometimes. And I also, have the same sense about you. Sometimes, I get the feeling that people in this work, this activist work, this doing this stuff, we get nowhere near the pat on the back. It's only work. It's only work.
Yeah, that's
only
right.
sacrifice,
Absolutely.
And and you're one of the brothers that I respect, because first of all, you're always available, pretty much. You're doing the work. It's not, whenever you can reach out to another brother or sister that actually understands where things are on the UN and EU level with Black folk, that's a special thing, because we can therefore communicate with the rest of the world accurately, So tell a little bit about yourself before we get started, brother. You're James Omolo. Where are you from, brother, originally?
I'm actually from Kenya. I came to Poland 16 years ago as a student, actually. And I get this question a lot. That's why Poland. It was accidental that I came here. But anyway, there's another story. So I did my master's here. I finished my studies, and then during my study, the course of my studies, actually, I
Hmm.
started writing. Um, I started with writing some magazines for some organizations or some universities, and thereafter I thought probably it would be a good idea actually to start something more physical. I mean, do something in the community, because this narrative is still there, Africa as a country. So
Hmm.
I started a foundation called Africa Connect, where we were actually connecting Poles and Africans in different scopes. For instance, going to kindergartens and teaching kids, or holding lectures at the universities and stuff like that. Just to demystify the narrative of Africa being a country, and that it's not a homogeneous um,
Right.
continent as we perceive it to be, especially um, in the West or in Europe. So that's where actually my activism started, and I remember it kicked off in 2013 when we had a study tour in Washington D.C., which was sponsored by the state government actually, and we were around 20 people of African descent activists in Europe, and that was kind of an eye opener actually. When I came back, the first thing I did, I went straight to American Embassy in Warsaw. I
Hmm.
told them just from uh, from the State House, and we need to White House, not State House, sorry, White House.
Hmm.
So created some stories there, but there were real stories actually. And they sponsored our meeting, roundtable meetings on xenophobia and hate crime in Poland. So that
Hmm.
was actually the onset of, subsequent activity that we really engaged in for probably 5 years. We did a
Right.
lot of events, roundtable meetings on the topic of hate crime, discrimination, and the rest. So I guess from these activities, from the events that I've been actually very active on, and also trainings and stuff like that, I
Hmm.
got quite understanding of the realities of not only mine but also other Africans or people of African descent by large that lives in not only in Poland but also in Europe,
Right.
and that was kind of amplified my writing. So
Okay.
my writing is not nonfiction. It's not fiction. It's just the realities that we go through by my engagements. I've done a lot of research as well. That
Hmm.
and I think the gravitating force has been that others have been, especially in Europe, others have been writing our own stories. So I
Right.
decided to let us own it and actually tell the story the way it is, not someone coming up with some fake research, and because
Actually, brother.
they have the capacity and the resources, and then
Hmm.
just released out there. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's kind of my story. I've been lucky actually to engage in some in international bodies such as the UN and the European Union as well. Fellow of
Hmm.
United Nations, both got the center HCR, and also I actively engage with the European Union on the diaspora issues. Actually, um, I think it was defunct, probably not defunct, but they stopped um, country visits. So we used to have country visits. Probably I attended around four of them in Eastern and Western Europe as well. So yeah, so I think that has really cemented my understanding of this muddy water that we
Hmm.
always swim in a way.
A lot of people may not understand like what the relevance of that is, and so let me go back. Like, for example, me myself, when I came to Europe, I didn't come to be involved in human rights at all, and I'm not even your, I wouldn't call myself a typical, I don't know if there's a typical human rights activist anyway. That's kind of like a misnomer, you know. It's basically anybody who's up for the task, who's up for learning, up to hit the street, up to mobilize people based on the realities and the law and things like this. What can be done, right? Within the law. And but when I came to Europe first, um I thought everything was all right. Things looked okay. Black people were walking around. They seemed happy, right? Why wouldn't they be happy, right? And
Yeah,
then in private, you know, then I start realizing, wait a second, there's another narrative starting to emerge from
yeah,
the sisters and the brothers, what they told me privately. But then there was a third point when I finally got into the law part of it. What does the law say? Where's the mention of the black people in the law? What's going on with? And then I realized there isn't. Then that really accelerated. That accelerated my understanding of what was going on. Like nobody's counting black people.
yeah.
No one's even looking for black people's voices. They're having a whole conversation about discrimination, and basically, black people are not even a part of the conversation. Uh,
Yeah.
Right, right. Is that what you meant by it accelerated? Like, you know, when you got involved with the UN and things, it kind of accelerated your writing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think you mentioned something that's really relevant. I think, I mean, there's so many activists, but I think it takes a lot just to be an activist. We're not talking about, these, I'll call them fashion activists in a way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Become activist when
Damn
there's
with
an
them.
event, and
Damn with
then
them. Yeah.
that, and just you have to be an activist. Actually, you have to go beyond activism. You have to go beyond just empathizing with others, or because you're really affected. But it's
Hmm.
all about also learning a lot of the legalities within your country and also beyond
Hmm. Hmm.
country. For instance, I didn't know so much about Polish penal code.
Right.
Used to, but I came to understand them through training. So I actively took part in so many trainings
Hmm.
um, that were conducted by OSCE, because they're based in Poland.
Hmm.
And through these trainings, I really came to understand the legal parameters in Poland. I came to understand the Polish penal code. So, for instance, if somebody now attacks me on the street, I know where to go, and actually I'll know, because in many cases you go to the police to report, and sometimes they
Right.
just dismiss it as, oh, they're just ignorant and stuff like that. But then you underline the article of the Polish penal code that actually protects you, and then
Hmm.
they will start getting serious about the case.
Hmm.
So I think going through all these trainings really helped me a lot, and I think this is the most ignored part by most activists. Just
Hmm.
that you can carry a banner and go on the road and stuff like that,
Hmm.
but the buck stops at having a relevant, not having a relevant knowledge on what should protect you. Of course, it's good to do stuff at the grassroots level, but you should also go beyond that and look into the national, the legal parameters that actually concerns you. I
Right.
mean,
The
I mean,
penal code.
it's really hard to understand everything, but the
Hmm.
quite that you can actually um, get used to in a way.
Right. Yeah, you get used to it because it isn't it has a it is what it is. It's written and it's not infinite. It's not as long as what people think. It's narrowed down, systematic, and you can target the things you want to know and need to know effectively if you seek it. If you seek it out, you will understand it and be able. Yeah. But let me ask you this. Let's get to some of the questions because I just want to let you know a lot of the people that follow, they're going to be in the U.S. Um,
Mhm,
some of the people are in the EU, definitely. A few people that's been watching already, they're in the EU. But
mhm.
um, but this, as you know, this is a topic that a lot of people generally know nothing about. Generally speaking, right?
Yeah,
So we can never discuss these points enough, just to bring awareness. Obviously, that's the first step, is awareness. Then people can make up their minds, or get a clearer picture. But let me ask you to start with the first question: is anti-black racism acknowledged in Europe? Are European nations confronting discrimination towards black people adequately according to the historic relationship legacy of slavery and colonization?
Um, Adequately, I think that should be the bars were there adequately. I think there's a recognition in a way. It depends on the member states, the EU.
Hmm. Hmm.
At the same time, is that recognition actually viable? Is it impactful in any way?
Hmm.
So I think this is it's really broad, very broad, because when we look at from the perspective of civil societies, which of course probably 80% are white run civil societies actually. There are
Hmm.
not so many black civil societies, as I would say. And again, from that perspective, the impact will be based on the activities they want, the kind of they want to implement, and who is actually going to fund it. So, from a civil society perspective, a black civil society versus a white civil society competing for a funding, there's high chances that the white civil society will get it. The
Right.
black civil society will get it. And I mean, it happens here, especially the EU funding, that most organizations that are actually Polish get more funding than us in a way. So you wonder why there's not so much development in any way, because they're not doing it for the cause. They're doing it because they have to, at the end of the year, they have to write a report and probably get some money from it.
Right.
And so it's not actually that they don't recognize, they do recognize it.
Acknowledge. They acknowledge. And okay, that's what you mean. Yeah, I
Acknowledge
got you. Right.
what the yeah, but how viable is it really? Is it trickling
Mm.
down to somebody like me who is exposed to all manifestations of racism or racial discrimination anyway?
Hmm.
So, because that's the inadequacy that prevails.
Hmm.
When it comes to the macro society, somehow, it depends also. I've seen a lot of changes, particularly in Poland, and for the better and for the worse as well. So it kind of fluctuates in most cases.
Okay.
Um, and in Europe, as you understand, the political narrative actually also is is very important, because, for example, now there's a lot of talks about immigrants, and when they talk about immigrants, it's not the ones crossing the Mediterranean. A migrant is somebody like me and you. So when I
Right.
walk on the street, I'm a potential refugee, because they would know, oh, James has been living here and is working here. Now I'm actually a potential refugee. So all the um, any form of hostility will be meted upon me by virtue of being perceived as a refugee. So
Hmm.
again, when you got the societal level, there are countries that are actually still very. I would say they're less tolerant to people of African descent in a way. So as I said, I mean the question is so broad. It depends on which kind of category are you going to look at it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I mean, it's a simple no. Like in my mind, if you ask me, the answer is no. It's not adequate. Very simple.
Of course, it's not. Of course, it's
Yeah,
not.
I say
No.
no. I mean, but then again, like the complexities, because it does depend on nation to nation. So it is hard to just say, you don't want to say there's no progress either, right? But adequate. I would say no. And this is a prime example. Like I was looking at this. This is for Poland. This is where you're at.
Yeah.
But the Danish one looks very similar. However, I did notice that there was something amended in the Polish law in 22, just last year. So I don't know if this hate crime report doesn't reflect that. I'm not sure what the amendment was, but I believe there was one a similar. I'm not sure, but I know there was an amendment or a change in how they perceive the Danish law that isn't also is not part of what we would see in the latest hate crime report. And that was I'm going to ask you if Poland did the same, if you know about it. That was what is it? How they perceive a hate crime, partial motive, right? Partial motive is now possible within the Danish reporting by the police. So before they weren't allowed to investigate partial motive. For them to try you for a crime. Like if it's going to be a hate crime, that's it. It's a hate crime. It's not something else. Another thing wasn't your motivation at all. So often what would happen is even though it looks like it was partially motivated by hate, they would skip that and go for the other motive, and spend all the
Yeah.
resources on that. I'm not sure if that's Poland, but let me look at this, man. This is worse. This is actually higher numbers than Denmark, my friend. I'm not sure what the population of Poland is. So, what's the population of Poland?
Now it's around 40 million actually.
There you go. That's why.
But
Right.
there's I mean the data sometimes could be there's some intricacies in the data really. So
Absolutely.
when you look, and that's why sometimes the data, of course, data is very important, especially in our work, well, in
Mm-hmm.
advocacy and
Mm-hmm.
lobbying. But if you look at the practical side of it,
Mm-hmm.
when you see the data, I mean the numbers increased. There could be two things. First, either the incidence has increased, more people are being attacked,
Mm-hmm.
than
Mm-hmm.
before, or more people are coming out to report.
Right. But did you read the did you read this latest being black in the EU? It's just published a few days ago. No more than 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw it, but I mean, again, I don't know the validity of it because
They make the argument, the opposite argument that
nobody came actually to do a research here. To be
say
honest,
that again. Say that
nobody
again.
came to do research here. I never heard anybody coming to do a research here, talking to people, and
Aha.
I
Okay.
never heard that.
Okay. Oh wow. So you don't know if Poland was included. I'm pretty sure they were, but
Poland is
that's
included.
interesting.
Poland is included, but I don't know how they got the data.
Yeah.
I
How did
mean,
they get the data? It's
yeah.
also the same for Denmark. I'm curious about that too. But they did state one thing in the report. And let me just post that report for the people here in the chat. They said, and I'm not sure if this is the same for Poland. Oh, okay. Donnie Williams is here and Andrea. Hello. And but they did say that as far as Denmark is concerned, I did take a look at Denmark real fast because I had to. But they
Mhm.
said that 1 in 10 people, uh, black people, actually report it to another institution. Like they may mention it to the police, and that's it. They don't go further than that, right? And but that's been the status quo for as long as I can remember. That's what it's been. So I'm curious if I'm curious if Poland is the same, because if that would be the case, then obviously these numbers, that would probably be a lot higher, right?
Yeah, I didn't go deep into. Actually, I didn't check it well, but I just saw just some snippets saying that Poland is the least racist incidences in the whole of EU.
Is
We
that
have,
right? Oh, by percentage, by population base, right? I got you. Yeah.
which is a fallacy
Hmm.
actually. So
Okay.
I think the problem with all this data that are being gathered, because most of these organizations are not trying to dismiss their data.
Hmm.
But the problem we have in EU, in Europe, that most of the data are secondary based data collection methodology. Um, they rarely go and talk to people I don't know if they had an access to even the police reports, which of course sometimes the police do not give the exact figure. I don't
Right.
know if they contacted some civil societies, which of course, if they did, I would have known, to be honest.
Hmm.
So I still don't know the validity of this really.
Are you talking about of the
FRA,
oh
FRA.
dear, right?
No, no, no. I'm not talking about Odia. Odia. They usually, I usually trust their data,
Right.
but the rest, I kind of doubt
Being
because
black in Europe. You mean
yeah,
being black in Europe report? You're not so right.
yeah,
Yeah, as far as yeah, I understand what you mean. It is it's important to know those things. You know where how are they finding it's the same. I had the same question. This is the second report. The first one I believe was like 2016 or 17. Now it's
yeah.
21, and I still had the question like where did they find all the respondents that were people of African descent? Because I sure as hell ain't one of them myself. Uh, I'm very
Absolutely.
curious. Yeah,
It's
I'm
quite,
very curious.
it's quite
Huh?
interesting because there's a research I started conducting 2 or 3 months ago actually
Hmm.
on racial discrimination in Poland. So we're trying to map people of African descent in Poland.
Hmm.
And I've been actually conducting interviews with people, and the narrative is quite sad sometimes. So people still that they're being attacked still. You know,
Hmm.
every every respondent I interviewed had experienced some sort of racial discrimination and hate crime or hate crime only stuff like that. So when
Hmm.
I saw this data, this report, was like, this have they really interviewed people, or they just
Right.
relying on some secondary data because the reality in the ground is totally different.
Well, they had for example, let me see. Let me pull this report up. They had, you know, let me see. If we go to I think it's this one right here. If we look to if I just pull it up, can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Mhm.
see it. And I say, let me just pop in here. Oh well, forget that. Dismiss. What is this? Can I say this? Yeah, Denmark, right? I go like this. Okay, so Denmark is where page. Okay, DK, and I scroll through here. They had some. Here, I think we're getting here right here. Boom. Now, let me just zoom it up a little bit, make it bigger if possible. Can I? Can I do that from here? Close this down. Oh, okay. Well, I'll do it this way. I think now you can see it. And then we scroll. Oops, scroll. Was that up or down? Yeah, here we go. This is what they have for the EU. But let me see how clear that is on the screen. I need to make it bigger. I see. Okay, let me do that. Oh, I escaped it. How did I do that? Oh, sorry about that. Let me see. Where did I go? Is it here? There it is, right there. Is that big enough? Can
Yeah, I
you
can
see
see.
it?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Okay. And it says here, let me see. Poland is PL right. You're right. You're among one of the lowest.
yeah, yeah.
But Denmark is is basically one of the highest. It's top,
Quite, quite
you could
interesting.
say five, right? Yeah. It's in the top five or yeah, something like that. Top five or six nations. And so I'm also curious about that, but I think yeah, I mean, I have a thought always myself that it is black civil society is not intact, is not functioning, is not, and even in Denmark, even though these numbers, I mean, are high, so I agree with that, but I also am aware of the challenges that you're speaking of. Like, there's even more how the police process these cases. People are not aware because let's keep in mind this has nothing to do with partial motive cases in the
Yeah.
U.S. So the Americans understand. So the American listeners understand. Partial motive exists in the US. So
Mm-hmm.
it's still a hate crime. If you wanted to rob someone and take the money, rob them for their money, that's a crime. But you could also call them the N word. That's a crime. You
Yeah.
see? But in Denmark, it's not like that. It wasn't like that. The N word didn't matter if the main motive was they came to rob you, and it would be perceived as they just incidentally called you the N word too. You know, it wasn't pursued in the justice system. So you could have a case where there was a young man who was murdered on an island in Bornholm, right? Um, they found that they tried to tie the murder into some relationship that he possibly had with the two men who murdered him, their mom. So he tried to say he was dating the mother of the two men that murdered him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although those three kids are friends, the three young men are friends.
Mm-hmm.
um, they lured him out to the woods to kill him, and one of the guys that killed him had like N-word tattooed, or no, a swastika tattooed on his arm. And a week before, he held up a sign on his Facebook page that said something like, F N words or F all N words, something like that, right? And so it wasn't a hate crime.
That's quite interesting because I mean, in order to, of course, I mean, it's hard to just at the initial stages to categorize that hate crime. I mean, any crime, but there has to be a motive. There has to be a bias motive, and during investigation, they have to check the indicators really based on the protected characteristics of the community that the individual belongs to.
Hmm.
Um, but I think dismissing it as just robbery, and this happens a lot in hate crime cases, that the officials always dismiss it, the law enforcement just dismiss it as just robbery or stuff like that. We had the same case. We have the same case in Poland where a guy is attacked during the football matches, and they report, and the first thing they say, oh, those are just they're just fans, football
Hmm.
hooligans. So they use hooliganism as the motive, but not on some indicator that may categorize it as hate crime. So this is
Hmm.
always a problem. But I think, I mean, the example just gave is a bit. Um, I think is a bit not. I think it could be
And it was a closed courtroom.
the
It
gap in
was a
the law,
closed courtroom.
the Danish law in a way, or they just don't want to, continue doing. I mean, continue with the investigation somehow. So they
Hmm.
just want to dismiss it as just American stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the dismissals. I can imagine a lot of dismissals in the EU, and but particularly in Denmark. But let me get to the next question here. What are some of the issues people of African descent face in Europe, and in what ways are these issues tackled in the USA differently? You understand that question?
Yeah, yeah, I do understand. Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah, and you could just give some
Issues,
examples. You know.
yeah, the issues I think are quite varied in a way. Just from doing the banal day to day stuff, like going to the train station or taking a bus, um, whether it's subtle or not, or covert or overt, being in a way profiled by the law enforcement, basically,
Hmm.
or being attacked on the street, or being called the N word. You know, Yes. Whenever you leave your house, there might be an incident. It's quite obvious that somebody might do something to you or say something to you. But this kind of at interpersonal level in a way, but there's also the institutional aspect of it. So, for instance, talked about accommodation, where you can get house,
Hmm.
um,
Housing,
because
right?
yeah, yeah, because um, you're black. It happens a
Hmm.
lot that you call and they tell you, or you use a friend, call, they tell you, okay, the house is vacant. You go there, they look at you and they say, no, we're not renting to you.
Hmm.
Sometimes they do it on your face. They say it on your face. Sometimes they just tell you, oh, it's, the house has been taken already. While they
Hmm.
already told you, they told you, they just go and, look at the house.
Hmm.
In health sector also, the kind of issues, some discriminatory practices actually, in terms of whether it's getting the right doctor, calling ambulance. So there's a case actually that I recall in one of my interviews, last interview. That this I just summarizing that this African girl who was, I think she was in her first, yeah, she was in her first trimester, and she started bleeding. This happened last month, actually. She started
Hmm.
bleeding. She called, so actually, she went to the hospital. So she called her friend, took her to the hospital. Upon reaching there, the nurses were actually reluctant to attend to her. So they told her, your case doesn't seem to be serious. Go
Hmm.
home tomorrow, go to your gynecologist, and then you can come here again,
Mm-mm.
which
Was
is
she a
not
citizen or resident already, or
residence.
she had legal residence, or was she,
She
yeah,
has
okay,
legal yeah, she has
yeah, okay,
legal
okay,
residence.
I understand.
And
Yeah.
so she had not. She just went back home.
Hmm.
When she went back home, it got serious. So the bleeding continued. Then she
Hmm.
called an ambulance. Obviously, the ambulance, the paramedics, they will always ask you questions. The process. And so instead of them going to her, they said, we can't help you now. You go back to the hospital where you came from.
Mm-mm.
She actually miscarried.
She miscarried. Yeah, yeah.
Miscarried. She miscarried.
She was having a
Um,
miscarriage right in their face.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the paramedics didn't come. So there's a lot of cases on health sector really. Also, even people often sent to our doctors and nurses the cases where the patients don't want them to actually attend to them or just treat them. So they
Hmm.
want another doctor, a white doctor.
Hmm.
Yeah, so there's also the issue of profiling, which is not as serious as in the US, but that is just random profiling
But,
that
but
usually
how do you
happens.
know? I mean, because see, this is what I wonder. Like, not to cut you off. I'm sorry, sorry, but for me, the most staggering thing that pops in my mind is no data. There's no see in the U.S. Everyone can point you they can't hide the racism. The racism's not hidden because they're collecting data on it.
Yeah,
Everybody gets to know about it across the world, and everyone gets to say, "Aha! This is how many times black men are getting pulled over in a car
yeah,
versus their counterparts. This
yeah,
is how many times a a hate crime, a black person gets discriminated against because of I mean, it's not hidden so much. Even though there's much that doesn't get out to the maybe in the main news media and things like that. When it
yeah,
comes to data, that's ugly enough. The data is ugly enough. You know how many how well black people are doing in housing. You know how well black people are doing with the economy, with in the job market and all of these things, even the health sector, all of these things, but yet in the EU, we don't. Like I I am like I'm I don't to me it just seems like that would be the worst thing that could ever be is to be unknown, unseen, have
yeah.
no one know what's going on because then no one can help you.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And there's a problem also we do have in Poland that everything is swept under the carpet, and so basically it doesn't exist. There's no acknowledgement that exists because they don't do it on your face, other than calling you N-word and stuff like that. But
Right.
the institutional racism is, you might think it's subtle, but it's not, and it's not something you're going to see with your eyes, but going to feel it. There
Yeah,
are
because
cases.
what's subtle? What's subtle? When you get fired from your job unfairly, is that subtle? Or when you get knocked upside the head and called the N word, is that subtle? Or
Of
just
course
because the
not.
fight
Of course
started
not.
about this is my seat. The fight started, this is my seat. You get knocked over the head, called the N word. The motive was you took his seat.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. I mean, the emotional predicament is quite dire in that regardless. So, according to them, it's like, you know, calling somebody an N-word, that's racism. But when I've been working for 10 years and I can't get promotion,
Right. How
then
did they
that's
monitor that? How did they
racism.
monitor it? How did they monitor
Right?
how affected black people are by that? How did they do that?
So this is the
And
biggest problem: lack of data, lack of disaggregated data. And I don't know if they did it there in this data you showed me for FRA.
no,
Uh,
no, no, no.
between
Because look, that's why
the,
I'm pulling it up. I noticed something that's very similar about this in Denmark, and it
yes,
stands out. It's that big blue line there. That
yeah,
big blue line says racist and xenophobic hate crime. But if you look, check this out. If you look at the one that's yellow, the yellow
yeah,
line here, it's called gender-based hate crime.
yeah,
3. Why is there even a category if there's only 3? But if
yeah,
you look at the blue one, it's got 100. The blue one has 231. 200. Am I looking at Poland? Yeah, 231.
yeah,
Why don't we know how many of these are black folk? But
exactly.
you know how many. I mean, you don't know who this is. It said gender-based hate crime, so I'm assuming it's women, right? People that call themselves women. I'm assuming that, right? But even if you don't take that one as an example, let's go to anti-Christian hate crime. We know what that is. It can't be confused. These are Christians. 10 of them happen. Why don't they just throw Muslim, Christian,
Hmm.
and let's look at this. Only 11. Oh no, no, hold on. Only this one. Yeah, there's 89. That's a lot though. Anti-Semitic is a lot, but it still ain't 231. Why don't we throw all these together and call it a wrap? Why do we need to know how many religious hate crimes are against Jews and how many against Muslims and how many against Christians? Why do we need to know that if we don't need to know who these racist and xenophobic hate crimes are against? That's not relevant. It's not relevant to know if they're black, if they're Arab, if they're any other race, any or perceived race. Like, what do you think the problem is here, bro?
I mean, I mean, this is something I've been pointing out. And I remember, I think before COVID, we had this discussion at the OSCE when they had this hate crime report. And I mentioned on the disaggregated data
Hmm.
how, I mean, why they cannot take intersectionality into consideration actually. Because if you are black, you're African, you're a Muslim, and you're a lady, a girl, or a woman,
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
experience will be totally different from a guy who's Ukrainian,
Hmm.
Christian, you know.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that is true. I mean, they don't take intersectionality is not taken into account. Not
Yeah,
yet.
and there's a problem when you're trying to provide. I mean, we're looking at it from victim approach mechanisms.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be hard if you only rely on this kind of data.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I think this has been the biggest problem when it comes to um, all these surveys. But again, getting a reliable data sometimes becomes really difficult somehow. For example, in Poland, where let's take example of accommodation, where the housing sector is actually privatized. We don't have that. There's government, like in Denmark,
Hmm.
where you commune and then you apply for housing and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
here, I mean, they're government houses, but nobody wants to live in them because they are in a very poor state.
Okay.
So the houses are privately owned, you know. So
Hmm.
it would be really hard to get a particular specific data based on, how many um, people of Afghan descent live in this kind of housing sector, stuff like that, you
Hmm.
know. So that will be an issue again. Also with the labor market, also which need a lot of studies, actually surveys, talking to individuals who are employed, you know,
Hmm.
uh, getting, because actually that's what I'm doing now. I'm talking to them and ask them, I mean, if they've ever experienced any form of racial discrimination in any way. And the answers I get, I've been working here, I've never got promotion for many years. While someone comes, a white Paul, who is less qualified than I, gets promoted and becomes my boss. The case is that, okay, I feel that because of my name, I cannot get a job, even though I've sent so many CVs to many companies.
Hmm.
There are cases where the employees or even the bosses actually racially insult them in a way.
Hmm.
So, but it takes time to get this kind of data, and you have to do survey of the whole country basically to get a more genuine data on that. So this has been the biggest problem, but I think the pattern is almost the same within EU, within Europe, when it comes to health, labor, accommodations, and also closing the border or profiling by the police or the border guard, stuff like that. There's kind of
Hmm.
a pattern, because the pattern varies from member state to member state, but the common denominator is that there's still there's still bias motive when in terms of engagement with people of African descent, especially from law enforcement.
Hmm. Wow, this says, can you see this right here? Awareness of support organizations, equality bodies, and anti-discrimination laws. It says here, let me just read a little bit from this. It says the survey asked respondents about their awareness of any organizations that offer support or advice to victims of discrimination on any ground. It also determines their specific knowledge of national equality bodies and their awareness of national anti discrimination law using three specific survey questions. On average, fewer than a third of respondents, 29%, are aware of any organization that offers support or advice to discrimination victims in their country of residence. No progress has been made in the area since 2016. In only two countries, Poland and Sweden, are more than half the respondents of African descent aware of specialized support organizations. Uh, in the remaining EU is 11 EU, or in the remaining 11 EU countries, awareness levels are lower, ranging from 19 to. Do you believe this? Like you said, this data was off, because when I looked at it just now, and then when you go down to here, and then look at the chart, it does have Poland up there in terms of awareness. 64%. That's a high number, right?
Yeah,
Is this six?
that could be true actually. To be honest,
Okay. Okay.
first, because we are very few in Poland, we are not more than 5,000 actually.
Okay.
Um, so
Well, Denmark is at 67 too, but they say only 1 in 10 report.
yeah, but okay. So there's a thing. Most of people of African descent, they live in major cities. Yeah, even though we're disenfranchised in a way, but we know each other. We have communities that we form. We have churches, so everybody is always in contact with another person. And I will take credit for this. Since 2013, my organization had conducted roundtable meetings on hate crime, racial discrimination in over 8 cities in the country.
Hmm.
And majority of attendees participants were actually Africans. So they
Okay.
know, yeah. So they actually know, we know each other, and also what we did in 2015 before the body was defunct, um, there was the Department of Hate Crime Control under the Ministry of Justice of Interior. So most of Africans who were attacked or experienced some form of hate crime, as they perceived, used to report to us, and then we forward their cases to the department. Unfortunately, the department um, was defunct by the administration later. So there's always somebody who knows somebody who actually knows the organization in a way. So I think the number might be high, but there's a lot of truth in that, considering the population as well, because we are not very many.
Right. Right. Okay, I got you. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Let me okay, so let me switch it now. How in terms of civil society, right? PADs, how connected would you say we are from nation to nation? How aware are we of each other like civil society? Let's say, for example, my organization here, Afro Empowerment Center, versus your organization or any other, or yours, you know, to any other organization across the EU. Is there a like cross information flow, you could say, going on right now,
Well,
currently? Okay, go ahead.
I don't think there's a flow information as per se. I think that somehow there is, but again, there's an inadequacy there. So in my case, I belong to different kind of platforms, basically, and these platforms, I'm a member of them because of my engagement, particularly to the event, the conference and stuff like that. So you meet members of society from different country, and they say, "Oh, we'd like you to join our platform somehow," something like that. So yeah, and that's how I came to know many civil societies in Europe. But I think not many people have this kind of what do I call it, not advantage in that sense, but the opportunity, because it's for civil societies that are working on human rights issues, um, getting into partnerships rather with civil societies work in the same area, same domain from a different country. But the thing here is that there usually no adequate flow of information. I mean, I'm a member of many of them.
Right,
I remember
right. I
even
got
any one project with them, you know. But of course, there's some that will, like there's one in Finland that, I mean, we applied for the same project together. Yeah. But not only once, there's another one in Portugal as such. So sometimes it also depends how you interact with people. But again, I know there are quite many of them that actually you're just there, but there's no flow of any information. But again, I mean, truth be told, majority, some of them, not majority, some of them just for their personal interest. Some civil societies are not for the cause,
you.
but sometimes just commercial in a way. Um,
Okay.
that
Like,
becomes an issue.
so you mean more like funding? They just get some, or like,
Just some funding, and then there's a lot. There's been I've been a member of some platforms where there's been misappropriation of funds as such, people
hmm
to get high and stuff like that. There are not so
hmm
many. But so this is just an example. It kind of exemplifies how some society members use that platform just to, for their personal interest, just to enrich themselves in a way. Yeah, not for the real cause.
right. Yeah, yeah. I've experienced that also here in DK, man. Sadly enough, it's like, yeah, it seems to be a fact of life, but not only with discrimination, issues of discrimination and things like that, but just, yeah, you could say that across the board. But in Denmark, we have three quote unquote PAD organizations, or now
Mhm.
only two. I don't there It sounded like there was three, because we had Black Lives Matter, which sounds like it's
Mhm.
like PAD relevant, but they didn't support Sir 34 at all or anything in it.
Yeah.
They were like totally, I don't know what the issue was with that, but then there's another organization that support that they wouldn't come out and say they support CERT 34, although they support the demand catalog. But then there's our organization. We support the demand catalog. I mean, we support the decade, of course, and CERT 34. And then we have something where we're just saying, at the very least, there must be acknowledgement that people of African descent are a specific group of people affected by a specific form of racism. And it has to begin right there in the hate crime reporting, in that hate crime report, no less than that. But we
yeah,
can imagine there's large sectors of society, all across society, something should be
yeah,
implemented. But if you can't even break down the hate crime report and tell if it's black people that are racially that are having the racist crimes committed against them, or if it's Arabs, or who, if you can't
yeah,
tell who, the public, that to me, that seemed like a complete abdication, because we're talking about violence.
yeah,
We're talking about outright violence there in the hate crime report. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that would seem to be the most urgent thing to know.
Yeah.
But yet they don't allow the public to know.
So that's just
So
an indicative of the rot in the society in a way.
yes, definitely. Yeah, because it is an indicator. Because if you don't want them to know about the most heinous acts, then
Yeah.
what do you think about the rest of it? What do you think about the less heinous acts?
Yeah.
The time where you go to the doctor and maybe your treatment is not that great, or you get a false diagnosis, or the time where you applied to go to a class and you find out that, oh no, they said I didn't qualify for this class. And or what about, all the other slights that go on every day at work? Did the union handle your case correctly? I mean, the unions are pretty strong in Denmark, but if you don't have guidelines, they can't
Hmm.
be stronger.
Yeah.
They can't be
Absolutely.
stronger. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in Poland, we're not that many actually, especially on human rights issue. Probably I could count like the bad ones, probably two or three, not more than three. Actually, two. And so we know each other. Um, I the rest are more humanitarian or development based NGOs. But when talking about civil societies, particularly on human rights issues, we are we are just two in a way. So
Hmm.
it's
Right, I
just,
got you.
just like a drop in the ocean.
Hmm.
And we had the Black Lives Matter incidents during George Floyd
Hmm.
murder. There was just a bunch of white people that organized a demonstration at the American embassy, and that was it. They
Mm.
went back home and closed the chapter. You know,
Well,
never.
it got worse here in Denmark. It was even worse than that. But go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Uh,
So it's like, okay, racial discrimination only occurs, only happens one day during the demonstration. Then they go back home. Then it's like there's nothing else. So these are it's kind of like a fad. They just want to publicize the NGOs or stuff like that using Black Lives Matter's name.
and was Black Lives Matter in Poland? Were they supportive of the decade? Did they mention the decade? Did they disseminate any information about the decade? Anything
Listen,
about?
nobody even knows them. I mean, I've asked several people who know who know them. I mean, nobody knows them. No African guy knows them, really, to be honest. I've never met anybody who knows them. So they just, I think they're just some local NGO that came up with, because it's,
Yeah, it's a quick way to get some money in, and
yeah,
yeah,
and then
and say
later,
something.
yeah, and then later they go apply for funding, and then they show, okay, we supported Black Lives Matter, then they get funding, and that's it.
Right, right. Okay. Let me ask you, because now we're going on an hour. So let me ask you this, brother. What would you say there's differences, you've noticed differences among different groups of black people in Denmark? And what would you say they were? Like, for example, the CERT 34, as it's written, it covers all of us. It covers all
Mhm.
of us, no matter where we're from. If I'm from the US, it
Yeah, yeah,
covers me. If you're from Kenya, it covers you regarding discrimination. If but it's terms of how we get along in the
Yeah,
society.
yeah.
How would you describe it? How would you describe it in Poland, for example?
From a Polish perspective, so
Hmm.
if you're an African, regardless of the country, I mean, so discrimination becomes geographical here. If you're black, and this happens with people that are within your network or people who knows you, probably particularly at work or where you live. So if you're from Africa, you get all the negativities about Africa. You're poor, you know, disease
Hmm.
ridden, yeah.
Hmm.
Wants to marry a Polish lady because you want papers, you're illegal in the country. Um, all that, all the negativities about all the prejudices against um, Africa, you'll experience them. If you're from the US, like you, the case of them, oh, I don't like black people, but you're better than them
But you're okay.
because they believe America is a rich country. So any black guy, any person from America is a rich one.
Right.
So your
Which is not
pocket,
true.
yeah, becomes your privilege. Your
Right.
association with your country becomes a privilege in a way. So
Mhm.
there's already, I mean, this
Our embassy is strong. Our embassy is active.
um, I don't know for now if they're active in
No, I
terms
mean
of.
the U.S. embassy is pretty active. They're pretty active everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, they are.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah.
in Poland, they have.
Versus, let's say, versus Kenya's embassy.
We don't even have an embassy here, but
Right. That's what I'm.
American corner in every city in the country. Yeah,
Right.
and they hold events, stuff like that. But it's not about that. It's not about being active or not. I mean, I
It's
know
just general perception. General. You speaking of
Polish
general
people.
perception, right?
Yeah, there are many Polish people who never attended any American event.
Mm.
Everything they know is from the movie,
TV. Right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And the TVs. Yeah. So that's where it becomes a bit tricky when you're looking at the variables there.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you're just walking on the street, you're a black person. It doesn't matter where you come from because they don't know. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
don't know. So whatever is meted upon black people, you'll be part of it. So, but again, I think, I mean, we don't have so many, um, I would say, so many black people from UK, or UK is another, and is another example actually, from
Mm-hmm.
UK, from the US, in Poland. The ones I probably I know five, only five actually. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, but the relation, the interpersonal relation between Africans and black people from other countries quite really cordial because we're not so many, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of interaction somehow. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And okay, so let me ask you this one question too, because you're in Poland, and for a lot of the people that were listening, what they heard about what the war in Ukraine, a lot of
Hmm.
people in the U.S. they heard this story,
Yeah.
which I'm surprised they heard, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm thinking they only heard of it because of the American media. The American media touches on this stuff. I, I'm almost sure of that. It wasn't the European media that broke the story. I'm almost sure of it. But or maybe it was the African media, but it was not Europe. Europe. But when the war happened, African students were trying to flee Ukraine, and many of them, there's reports that they were trying to flee to Poland, where you are.
Yeah.
And have you heard about that? And what's your thoughts on this kind of dynamic?
Well, I was directly engaged actually in the process, the whole process, right from day one. Actually,
Oh, really?
um, yeah, yeah. Um, we were working tandem with other people and other organizations. So when the war broke out, um, there were so many Africans who actually started crossing the border,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
that they were told to go back forcefully because they didn't have papers. They were looking for papers. So
Oh,
the
they
first,
were told to go back.
yeah, because they're checking the papers. And actually, it's something that the government refused. They denied it, that they didn't send them back.
Oh,
But
wow. I never heard that
yeah,
before.
they gave I mean, they gave their stories, they gave it was documented, it was corroborated also by the mainstream media.
Wow.
We even wrote a petition to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Justice on that.
Okay.
After I think the next day they said no, they didn't. There were some hooligans, some skinheads who actually tried to intervene. But of course, that was a different incident. Um,
Okay.
I think the case of Ukraine, even though I mean, it just shows the pre-existing condition, that part were facing there, and it kind of it's not something new because when I met most of them, they're just saying, this is something that we experience most of the time. Through the evacuation process, some Africans, because they had this process where women first, then the
Hmm.
rest.
Hmm.
African women were denied, were told to go back to their queue. They were literally
What?
denied. Yeah. Some were even pregnant. There's some that gave birth here in Warsaw. So there's a lot of discrimination by the border guards, by the police. Yeah. There's some
Wow.
who actually, there's a guy, a Nigerian guy, who traveled for 24 hours in
Hmm.
snow
Hmm.
just to get to the border because he tried hitchhiking. Nobody could give him a lift.
Mm.
He couldn't cross the main border. The trains, they were telling Africans to go back. They were not
Hmm.
allowed at the beginning. They were not allowed to board the trains. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm. Hmm.
so the whole process
Wow.
when it started, we were really inundated because we had to find accommodation for them.
Hmm.
The government actually provided accommodation for Ukrainians.
Hmm.
Africans, we had to find, we had to pair them with other Africans. We had to
Hmm.
take them to other African places. So the problem we had is that most African countries in Poland do not have embassy. So we had to
Right.
fill the gap of the embassy. And so we had to contact also other third organizations like in Netherlands, in
Hmm.
Germany, and they provided the supplies, just the basics, medicines, food,
Hmm.
clothes, shoes, and stuff like that,
Hmm.
for children as well. So it was, but it never ended there because I remember there's a case of this pregnant woman who went to the hospital. The
Hmm.
government said actually that any refugee from Ukraine should get free medical care. She went to the hospital. She was forced to pay. She
Wow.
was forced to pay. Yeah.
That is that is insidious because you
Most,
would think, I mean, that's a lot of extra paperwork to for somebody to pay. It's like
yeah. Yeah.
that's
And
weird.
the government also announced that for any refugee from Ukraine have free access to the public transport.
Right.
Black
Goodness.
people had to pay.
Just because you couldn't prove you were Ukrainian.
Not that they
But
couldn't
it
prove.
shouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, but you're not Ukrainian, so Ukrainian you have to be white. You know.
Mm,
So,
mm,
but later, things started changing slowly. And majority of them didn't want to stay in Poland, and actually
mm,
majority of them were students. So we were also sourcing for the scholarship and stuff like that, or countries
mm,
that will take students so that they can continue their studies. So majority of them went to, actually not very few stayed. Majority of them went to Germany, Netherlands, Ireland, and other countries, UK and stuff like that. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. If the same thing happened with another EU country, let's say Finland, for example, or let's say Poland, for example,
Hmm.
right? What
Mhm.
do you think there's any measures in place to go dag I'm only remembering the Danish word now. It's called ungo in Danish, but
Mhm.
hold on. In English it would be called to avoid the same type of issues. Do you think there's been any changes implemented in the law and the border control? Like, would if the same thing happened again? If there was another war, would the same instances happen again with Africans, with Black people crossing the border, fleeing the war into another EU country?
Come on, it's not like if it happens again. It's happening now. It's still happening.
It's
It's happening
happening
at the
now,
Polish-Belarusian border
right?
every
Okay.
year. Last year, a 28-year-old Ethiopian girl died on the border. This
Mm.
year, two have died on the
On the
border,
Polish border,
Polish-Belarusian border. Actually, one died inside the Polish border, inside the Polish territory.
coming from Ukraine.
No, no, from Belarus.
Oh, for Belarus, right? Okay, okay. So it's still
So,
ongoing. It's just happening. It's just regular. Nothing is
yeah,
gonna.
so
Nothing's
it's actually
changed there.
happening. It's happening now, and because they built the fence, and they're really proud of the fence. Actually, they've been quoting about Trump building the fence,
Hmm.
the wall. So they built the wall, and what Belarus is doing, they give them the ladder, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they climb the ladder, but on the other side there's no ladder. It's like a big wall, a tall wall, yeah.
Hmm.
So when they jump, some of them they break their legs and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
Somalis last month, and there's some Somalis that broke their legs and stuff like that. So
That's terrible.
this is the thing. Compassion is depends on the color of your skin. If they had to do something, because remember, EU actually affected the pushback process,
Hmm.
which is actually is against the United Nations Convention on Refugee.
Right. It is.
So they are taking them back, but they always have a reason. They say, because it's politicized also, because Belarus is actually using them, and when because these are desperate people, so when they reach the border, they're told to go
Right.
back to Belarus. You know,
Mm, mm,
so
mm.
it's still happening, and I mean, like nobody even think about the situation, and it's getting worse and worse every day. Yeah.
Yeah, that is actually hard. But you know what? It's actually good to catch up with you on that, brother. And we need to talk again, actually, offline. Especially, I had no idea. I mean, I would guess. I know that the EU's been hard on Africans. Period. The EU
Mm.
has hard. The law about um being a refugee. Come on, man. It's horrible. It's got to be
Yeah.
the worst case scenario for Africans. Like, it's a nightmare on all accords. Just, even before people are even getting to Europe. For
Mm.
example, like to the Belarus part. That's one catastrophe out of many. I think the next time I have you up, man, I want to talk some more about just the immigration and refugee status. About African people, because so little is known and so little news gets broadcast. I mean, I can't, to be honest with you, I can't even point to one outside of this report being black in Europe. That's every 4 years. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Outside
Yeah.
of that, there's almost nothing. There's
Yeah.
almost nothing I can pick up and read about it to know
Yeah.
about what's
Absolutely.
going on in it. And it's that's pretty scary, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's racialized borders. It's quite prevalent. Racialized
Right.
borders.
But I appreciate your time here, brother. And uh outside of your newest book, I know that you put a lot into this, and
Mm.
all the books that you publish. But this book, um what would you say is the most potent, what would you say is the chapter that is most concerning when you talk about this subject here, that everyone can understand across
I
the
think,
diaspora?
yeah, I think all the chapters actually, all the chapters,
Okay.
because it's not about one topic. There are different areas that I actually covered.
Hmm.
Um, Everything is based on white supremacy, and I'm not trying to demystify whiteness, but the ideology behind it. So I gave a lot of examples on most of the subjects that we usually cover. Whenever you asked what it means to be a black person, I'm not sure if FRA read the book, went through the book, but
Hmm.
they looked at racial discrimination from interpersonal to institutional level. We went to EU level, actually. I talked about different areas of racial discrimination and how it manifests itself. You know, um, I talked about. I started with the genesis of race. I touched America a little bit, like West Virginia. Also talked about racism at the EU level. I talked about racism in sports. You know, traveling while black within EU. So everything in the context of EU. Yeah. So it covers almost a wide range of issues that entails black people, basically, whether it's
Hmm.
a whether it's institutional or interpersonal, whether it's culture appropriation, whether it's black facing, which is very common nowadays, especially in the Netherlands, in Germany, all that I discussed there as well.
If you had to just one last question, bro, before we close down, let me ask you this. Do you think how much do you think things have changed for PADs um positively in the last, let's say, 10 years in Europe regarding human civil rights? Yeah,
Well, I think,
the overall standing of PADs. Yeah.
but look, now you say Europe has become more far right, like very far right. You know, you have countries. Fortunately, our neo-fascist government actually lost in the election, so we expect things to change. But look at countries like France or um, Slovakia. Look at Hungary. Look at Greece. You know, I think that most countries are leaning toward the right, very far right, and that makes our life sometimes difficult. But I think there's a lot of improvement in terms of the international bodies and also the local institutions. So when you talk about hate crime, most countries, I don't know about Denmark, they actually recognize this hate crime. They recognize hate crime within their penal codes, even though some are quite not specific. But there's been a lot of quite a number of changes within the institutions, but the political narrative actually doesn't resonate with the reality somehow, or the institutions actually do not address most of these issues. So it's really hard to say if there's a lot of improvement. It depends on country to country, really. In terms of Poland, in regards to Poland, I think the last 3 years has been one of the worst. Probably the last 8 years has been one of the worst for PAD in terms of the experiences, because we had a very far right wing government and they nurtured most of the incidences in a way, so they could publicly talk about, you know, issues to do with PAD. I remember there's a time the president, 2 or 3 years ago, before COVID actually, the president made some jokes of an aeroplane going to Ethiopia and everybody dies, but um, everybody was eaten, but only one guy wasn't eaten by cannibals because he was recognized as a Polish professor. So that's the whole president making that. There's a time also the kingpin said that Poland should not actually accept refugees because particularly from Africa, because they're coming from with some diseases that are not in Europe. and people believe that the locals sometimes believe that. And since he made that comment, there are a lot of incidences actually of hate crime, and also the N word and stuff like that. So most people, they listen to politicians, and what the politicians say um, has a lot of impact on the minorities, those the targeting their words.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you 100%, brother. It is seem it's very right now very right wing, and it's almost normalized. That is really the scary part about it, that the right wing policies have been normalized. They almost look moderate, but because it's so normalized across the EU, it didn't used to be that way. You know,
And look,
now
yes,
now there's a
some people
lot of
are.
right wing symmetry. It seems, but
Yeah, so in most countries, to be re-elected, you have to be on the right. In most countries.
yep, exactly. That's the current state. But guess what we have for you, brother? If you have a couple more minutes, we have a wonderful guest by the name of Andrea Burnett. And I'm sure she came here to ask you a question because, well, guess what she told me? She bought your book and read it
Oh,
already.
that's
So
nice,
here
Andrew.
you are, brother. How you doing,
Thank
Andrea?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It's a pleasure. I just wanted to say your book is very informative, and it gives us insight for those of us who don't live on the other side of the world. What you're experiencing over there is similar, probably not. I don't know if it's worse, but similar than what we go to here in America. And I want to know, have you lived in America for any length of time, and or any to see the parallels, or how what you guys are facing in Poland, or even with V. Bennett in Denmark, how it's similar or different.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, and I'm happy that you found the book very useful for you. I've never lived in America other than, I mean, in my entire life, I've been to the US only twice. One was in 2013 Washington, and recently I was at the United Nations General Assembly um, in June. No, it was United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. That was in June. But of course, we meet people, the civil society, we chat, we listen to what's going on in the US. Um, I read newspapers as well, but they're not that, credible sometimes. There's a lot of sugarcoating somehow. Probably they just don't say the truth. Drawing a parallel, I think if I tell the case example, if I draw a parallel between US and Poland, I think there are two worlds apart in terms of experiences, but at the same time, the kind of some similarity that there's manifestation of racial discrimination. I think the institutions in the US are more stronger than the ones in Poland somehow. And I also think that, as Victor mentioned earlier, in the US it's quite they do it on your face. Here we have police profiling, but I mean, it can't reach the magnitude it is in the US or in the UK, in that matter, where there's frisk and such. You know, here when you involve when the police stops you and start harassing you, stuff like that, and you say, "Oh, I think you're harassing me because I'm black." Oh, they just get scared. You know, they start getting scared because of that. But of course, they still do that somehow. We don't have that kind of harassment we have in the US. But I think, in generality, I think we still have a long way to go here in terms of the institutions, um, in terms of how the law is defined. Because in the US, the law is there, but break the law most of the time. We don't have so many currents like in the US. Um, And the reason is that people tend to do things here secretively. You know, sometimes a neighbor might call a cop that, or probably you're playing a lot of music, or there's a lot of noise from your house because you're friends. But then the police comes and the police won't tell you it was your neighbor who called them. Yeah. When
Hmm.
it, yeah, and I think so interpersonal relations is it would be hard to say, because I haven't lived in the U.S. But here things tend to be to be always swept under the carpet. Oh, or just ignorant. I said it because we're not used to seeing black people. Just ignorance, nothing else. I'm not racist. There's always, oh, I have a friend from Zimbabwe. I cannot be racist. You know, so it always take that trajectory. So I think in the US, everything. I mean, it's more open than in Poland. If I'm attacked today, I go to the police station, I record. Um, if they don't take the situation serious, then I can actually go to walk into the ombudsman office, and they will make a follow up on the matter. So, and the ombudsman office has been really, really helpful. So I think in terms of the institutions, they're trying, but still there's a lot of hiccups in that. Somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah, a lot of the. Go ahead.
I think being black in the US is way much more dangerous than being black in Poland.
Okay.
As a black, as a black male or female somehow, especially on
Hmm.
punctuality, we don't have that much here really.
Okay. Yeah, because it's tough over here. I mean, I know people coming from other countries sometimes probably don't think that, and they think that those of us in America we whine too much or you know make everything about race. But I mean, for me particularly, I don't see it when it's not about that. Things have
Yeah,
happened to quite a few people in this country, and until the George Floyd situation happened here. People act like they were so oblivious to how we are handled here in America, and then they still want to say, well, you're just crying racism. No, no, I mean, you prove to me when the point is not that, because there was no, there were so many other people that have lost their lives in a similar manner to George Floyd, that those who were swept under the rug, but for some reason or another that one was put to the forefront and everybody was able to see how hard it was across, not just here in America but around the world. I think people had just had enough of
yeah,
um, the senseless murders that take place of Black people here in America. So, but I really enjoyed your book. I would just as much as I enjoyed V. Bennett's book. It's very informative because it's good for us to know, for those of us who are not living on the other side of the world, that we're experiencing similar circumstances and situations, that we all can embrace our brothers and sisters around the world, because we keep trying to find a way to, or they keep trying to find a way to keep us divided, when in
exactly,
actuality we are all experiencing the same type of treatment,
exactly,
no matter where we lay our step our foot. And we really need to come together behind this same mindset that's trying to spread itself across the world, because that fascism is trying to come here to America. It is to some extent, but we still have some pushback here. So
absolutely,
I mean, it's trying to make its way here too. So it's important that we look at the global aspect of what's happening to us around, and take action that way, and not with our little splinter groups. I'm part of this, I'm not part of that, and all this other stuff, because
Hmm.
that's not helping us at all. Religion, your politics or whatever is not helping for us to
yeah,
come together and try to remedy these situations that are going on globally.
absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned, there's also the similarities. Like I didn't know, like in America, they even know the names of black people.
Hmm.
Apply for a job on your CV, they basically know there's a black man's name, a black woman's name. You know, here in Poland, it's quite easy. If I have an African name, they automatically know it's an African name or is
Hmm.
a name, because their names are, or is Muslim name, stuff like that. And then they take advantage of that. So you apply for jobs, but you don't get the job. You don't get
Hmm.
any phone call, but it's your name that actually betrays you. you know.
Right, and that happens here too. I mean, some uh, groups of people, even if their names are contrary to being quote unquote American, they'll be hired on because they, especially if they recognize them as, well, I'll just say if they're Indian or something like that, or Asian, they might not experience the same problems we have as, if you were to come with your name or whatever, they may not have as many problems. So all that stuff exists. Even when you were talking about the lady who was having, the miscarriage and stuff like that. We have to fight that over here too, because our women are dying over here too in birth and stuff like that. We have higher rates of all this kind of stuff because they will try to administer that same kind of thing if you don't, if we don't stand up for ourselves here in America. It's the same. It's maybe not as egregious, but it's still happening here in America. And that's why I'm saying we all need to get together behind all these atrocities that are happening to us globally, that affect us on every level, not just, in politics and in religion, but every level. And that should be our foundation.
Absolutely. That is spirit of Ubuntu.
Yeah, we need to bring more awareness, and that's what for me, like we were discussing earlier, for me, when I realized there was no data, Black people don't even exist within the law, in terms of laws on how do you combat discrimination protocols and things like that. No such thing as anti-Black racism. They don't even know how to process it. It's that crazy, right? And when I realized that, it changed me, right? But now I'm at the next point now, James. I'm at the point where I'm like, now African Americans need to know what is going on in Europe with Black people. They need to know what's going on with their counterpart, because I have a strange suspicion if they don't, they're gonna, people are gonna take note of that too and be like, you know what? If Black Americans aren't concerned about what's going on in Europe, then hey, because if there's no one pushing, and this leads to my other, I got one more question, and I'm gonna let you all dialogue again. If there's no one pushing, nobody's going to feel the heat to do anything. But let me ask you this, James. Do you feel like people of African descent in the EU states are afraid, pretty much, or maybe don't know what they can do, or still trying to evaluate? Maybe, like, what is it about what's going on in America that African Americans or Black people, I don't want to say African Americans because it's Black people too, it's just, that's happening there. People are speaking up. What is it about those differences? Why don't we see? I mean, I don't want to. I see it sometimes, but right now, brother, it is strangely quiet across Europe. What do you think about that? Do you think there's a difference? Do you think there's a little fear there or uncertainty about what is it? Is it the fact that we're not citizens, most of us, right? Is it that we feel like we're going to lose something if we speak out? So go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the two also. So majority, the fear factor is that if you want to talk about it, you're actually exposing yourself. By exposing yourself, if you don't have proper documents, then there's a likelihood that you might be deported. And that many people have been deported because of that.
Right.
So the fear factor. And the second part of it is that, truth be told, we are not organized. And we are really divided, disenfranchised. We don't have unity. And this is the problem we have. You cannot have a formidable voice, or a voice basically. You cannot have a voice if you don't have a formidable group, a strong one. And I can give you an example. Here in Poland, we have the Vietnamese group. These people are strong like an iron. They support each other. They have one voice. And they always shield some of their candidates during election time. While our people, some people just don't give a damn. I wake up in the morning, I go to work. At the end of the month, I get my salary. Why should I care? Until they're attacked, that's when they start coming.
Right.
Another issue is lack of awareness. People just don't know what to do because they don't know anything. They're not interested in joining, in going for a workshop. They're not interested in reading. They're not interested in attending some of the seminars, even though most of them are online. They're just not interested. They're just complacent in a way, you know. And this is the problem we have. And you cannot make progress if you are divided as a community. That's quite important. If PAD organizations will form a stronger organization within the regions without any ulterior motive, then we'll go far. But as we mentioned earlier, during the beginning of the talk, there are quite a number of PAD organizations, but some are interested in money, some are interested in the cause, some are
opportunism.
So everyone has their own motive in a way, and that's why nothing much is happening. So there's a lot to be done. I mean, the change always starts within us, then we can extend it. But if we are already separated, it's really hard to, even to appeal or to lobby something for this. You're already separated. Talking about the data, nobody's going to have this disaggregated data if we don't do it.
Right. If we don't demand that, it's not happening in the EU.
Yeah, we can demand, but just be whitewashed. But if we do it, then we can have a concrete data that actually can project our experiences, our realities, our life chances. Second data, outcome that we actually do not know if everything is just the way it is. It's analyzed there. So I think there's a lot of issues going on between amongst PAD organizations in Europe, and I think it's high time they started actually being more responsible and forming more formidable group somehow.
Right.
It's going to be a hard task, but it has to be done.
It has to be done. And okay, one thing popped in my mind when you were saying this. Hang on. Oh my God, forget it. I'll come back to it. Andrea, what were you going to say? It was something. Right, James. We know each other because we're following. We're back. We support the decade for people of African descent. We support the CERD 34. We support the CERD, the ICERD, which is the International Convention on Racism. We support that. So our organizations are following that premise. It is law binding, the ICERD. And the CERDs that come after, like the CERD 34, they're not law binding, they're recommendations, but it's here's my point. If we don't demand it, right? If we don't demand the disaggregated data, we don't belong. Because it's as good as saying you don't belong because the rest of the people got it.
Absolutely.
They have rights.
Yeah.
That was it. Go ahead if you want to respond. Otherwise, on to Andrea. You wanted to say something?
Because I noticed like here after the George Floyd situation, we got put up to the top for just a brief period of time until the Asian crime started happening. Then we got smacked back down as if it didn't matter. And all the stuff that we've been saying all these years, and so the data, even here, even as much as we do have it, that data is going to be skewed too in the favor of, everything wrong with Black people or people. I'm going to say Black people because that people of color covers too many other people, but Black people specifically, it gets blown out of proportion, especially when it comes to our health. We get, we get it, and I think sometimes it's done to make it seem like that we're just so disposable. Okay, if they have all this high rate of, high blood pressure, whatever the case may be, well, then they're just a drag on society. We're going to, it's going to cost us more money in the long run. So I think all those numbers to some degree are skewed when it comes to the policing or anything like that. I mean, when it comes to any of those things, I think they always want to make our numbers seem like they're just so astronomically high to where that there's justification for any type of genocide they might try to participate in to the ridding of Black people here in America. So I don't pay too much attention when I hear those numbers. And if we don't gather it ourselves, I do agree with that. If we don't get the numbers ourselves, it's hard to believe the other, because the other to me always has motives and intent behind it that are not good for us.
Well,
so
the thing, Andrea, is that the data that we showed from the EU, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the data in the US, it's the same rules. It's voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually voluntary. You don't have to give up no information. It's voluntary. Right. So that means Black organizations can do their own data if they follow the rules. And that is rules to privacy, rules to anonymity, these kind of things. To not sell the data, to not use the data for any other purpose, just, for that report, survey and report, and Black organizations can do it. That can be space. That should be prime space for Black civil society in Europe to be doing that data. By the way, brother, did your organization do a survey? Because we did our second one ourselves. We did our own data. We didn't give it down. We went out and did our own data just to poke at people, to poke at Black civil society, and to poke at the larger, human Danish Institute of Human Rights. No pun intended, but everybody gets a poke on this one. You know what I mean? So we did it to take a poke at everybody. How about in Poland? Were any Black civil society doing surveys?
No, not really. Now we're just doing one on mapping people of African descent in Poland. I'm actually overseeing it, and hopefully before the end of the year we have some data on that. Nobody's ever done it. Nobody has ever done it before.
Somebody got to do it, bro. Somebody got to do it, and I'm gonna tell you, I wish you to do it. I know you're going to be involved in it, at least part of writing the report, or if not, gathering some of the respondents for a survey or something. But definitely, I mean, nobody's ever done it, and somebody's got to be the first. And from experience, I could tell you, everyone once wished later that they were the first. We beat the EU. We beat the EU, man, just by like 6 months. We beat the EU. You know what I mean? So their first report, so maybe more people will catch on. But go ahead, Andre. I see you thinking, so go ahead.
No, I just, I agree with everything you're saying, because if we don't go out there and collect the data on our own, I mean, I just think they because, every time you turn, you see this, and 50% of U.S. agrees. I'm like, oh, okay, nobody asked me. Who you talking to? Every time I see those numbers out there, I'm like, y'all talking to a small group of people, because you ain't asking a whole bunch of people about how they're feeling about a particular situation subject at the time. And so I do think that but what you guys are saying, I just think it is important that we get our own numbers and not separate this stuff. I think what's harming us the most is all these different things they put in here to divide us, from religion to politics to whatever it is. It's just, those are just the, and if we can't get past those, in lieu of trying to get here, because I think some people are afraid now to speak up and say, whatever it is that's causing this angst in the community, right? Especially when it's geopolitical, it's gonna feel, I think some people feel it's gonna harm us in one way, shape, form, or fashion. Well, we're already being harmed whether we say it or not, and so I think more people, we have to do our own, because it's just too much out there. And there all these statistics are out there saying that we're the most prayingest and praying people that they're here in America, but yet where's the result of all that praying and praising? It hadn't gotten us anywhere, because we're still stuck trying to just uplift our pastor or whatever. I'm not casting any aspersions on anybody who does that, but to the point where you put your pastor above the needs of the people or whatever, we make it get so ridiculous sometimes. So I agree. I mean, like I said, I encourage everybody to buy your book. By V. Bennett's book, because it's very eye opening. If they haven't read them, they really do need to sit down. I got your book I got V's book on a. I mean, it doesn't take long. The reading is not long. If you just
Yeah,
sit down and put your mind to it, it makes you kind of angry a little bit, when you're reading it sometimes, because you're like, dang, we can't go nowhere, and it's just have a sense of peace and serenity. But I
yeah.
encourage everybody, get them and read them, so you get most people will never venture to the other side of the world, but we
Yeah.
have a view from your eyes what's taking place over there. And I would encourage everybody who's listening and anybody who picks this up later, please avail yourself and inform yourself about everything that things that are happening on the other side of the globe, so we can do something to make this change, because it's not gonna happen through religion. We already know that. It's not gonna happen. Religion's
Absolutely.
not gonna bring us together. It's just not.
Yeah.
And neither
Yeah.
is being, political, whether you're Democrat or Republican or whatever it is in Poland or Denmark. That's not because you got too many of us divided down that. But what we shouldn't be divided on is how we're being treated as people, as Black people, anywhere and everywhere. So
Absolutely.
Yes, and the
Thank
political parties know damn well they are. They know exactly. All political parties in Denmark, all of them know they have not officially acknowledged people of African descent as a
Mhm.
specific group of people affected by a specific form of racism. They all know that. They all read the charters. They've all read Sir 34, all of them, and even the liberal parties. And so, where's the votes? They get it. They can get votes for anything. They actually any. I mean, it just really boggles my mind. It really boggles my mind how at this point I feel like I don't like to talk bad about my own people, but I do. Our people need to listen. Largely, this issue about being acknowledged as a specific group of people affected by a specific form of racism, largely, if we want someone to put that into law, to make it finite law, we need to be demanding it as a group. We need to be out there saying, we know what's coming to us and we want it now. We need to say, we found out about this. How come you didn't tell us? We need to be out there. You knew about this for 10 years. They knew about that since 2011, brother. It's
Mhm.
it's 12 years now. It's 12 years past. It's 12 years past. Sir 34. It's 12 years past. And I just don't. The one thing I haven't seen is I haven't seen the multitudes of Black people in Denmark that say they are politically active get behind Sir 34, their own charter. I've seen them, and again, I'm not trying to diminish any other group. I've seen them march and demand shit for every other group. I have
Mhm.
not seen every other group demand the same equal treatment for PADs. Because let's think about this. If you're in the hate crime report, then why the hell wouldn't you be demanding something about anti-Blackness in that hate crime report? Because it doesn't take a genius to know that Black people experience racism too, discrimination also based on that. So, what's your theory about other people? Do you think what does that make you think about other people, James? To know that they're not demanding it, but yet someone might ask you to come and stand with them.
Um,
It's
we have this.
normal. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm getting excited now. Let me calm down. Go ahead, brother. Go
I mean,
ahead.
we have the same case actually in Poland. Again, is about engagement, you know. And I can give an example. We used to have it was called the first Black Obama in Poland. He was elected. He served a term, and we knew each other actually. So there's a time we had the first African Diaspora Conference. He attended, and then, because it wasn't political, it was about business and stuff like that. And then we had a second one. It was on racism and hate crime. And he said, no, I cannot attend your event because of my position in the parliament. So some few months later, in the parliament, his colleague forgot that his microphone was on, and then the colleague was caught calling him N-word. That guy, I mean, the media picked it up, and he was no,
Wow.
he went for for an interview in the media. Said, "No, I don't care. You can call me N-word. It's okay." You know.
What?
Yeah, and then some African, one guy from civil society, African, who've been living here for more than 30 years, was also called the following day, and he got angry. Why? He's saying that actually he's just enabling others to use the same word. So, and the media enjoyed it because you have these two Africans fighting each other. You know,
Hmm.
they really enjoyed it. And then
Yeah.
later, another member of parliament was elected from Zambia. Actually, he won 3 terms. But the difference between the two is that the one from Zambia was actively involved, actually, on racial discrimination issues at the
Hmm.
EU level. And he's the one who used to invite me so many times in some of the meetings, just talk about the issues, our experiences in Poland as such.
Hmm.
So, and the reason I'm saying this is that most of our community members are part of this mindset, the one initially mentioned. Yeah, the one who said anyone is okay.
Mm.
People are politically engaged, you know,
Apologists, basically.
apologists, yeah. And also, we have so many Uncle Toms. That's the problem.
Mm. Mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm,
And
mm.
it makes it really hard, really, to effect any change if we are really disenfranchised, you know.
And think about how much of an Uncle Tom you have to be against something that's so basic as
Yeah.
disaggregated data. I mean, you really have to be the a serious Uncle Tom because again, you know, if there was, if we're talking about human rights, we're
You know?
talking about basic human and civil rights. I could understand if you know, if we all had the same basic human and civil rights and you cheated, you know, and let
Yeah.
the other team win a game, you know, or you cheated someone at work even. You know, you okay, but look, right now what we're talking about is, man, just a basic hate crime. You don't have the
Yeah.
same right as another person with basic violence. That to me, that's like worse than an Uncle Tom. That is
Yeah.
like that's that. Well, is there some? Is there a word for that? Worse than an Uncle Tom? Just no use as as a person, a human being. No
Yeah.
use.
It's nefarious, really. And I think that's why there's not so much progress, really. However much you try, but the people always push you back, you know. And but of course, that's how society operates. There are people like that within our societies, not only amongst PAD, but also in other
Yeah,
communities.
it's human behavior. It's human
It's human
behavior. Like,
behavior, you know.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
think ours is more pronounced, and also considering the urgency, you know,
right.
that it's high time we started actually to take things seriously.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%, brother. Wow, you know what, James? Um, I think today we had enough, brother. We're gonna come back because you know, to be honest, there's so much more we could talk about, and especially when we talk about the Uncle Toms, because that should be a whole segment. You could air out your Uncle Toms in Poland. I'm gonna air the ones out here in Denmark. Hey, you know why? Because look, James, let's think about this because we know there's one thing for sure that we know that within this certain network, people
Mhm,
know who's been doing work consistently over a long period of time. And
mhm.
after a while, people know who you're going to rely on, who you can bank on, who you can count on, right? And but it can't all be like sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. Sometimes we
Mhm.
just got to speak the truth
Yeah,
and
yeah.
air it out. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
I'm my thinking is that before we turn the next page, because the next page is going to get turned, we need to just get people mobilized. And if we just have to be frank about the situation, um, to air out some things, clear the slate, um, and make room for more people to be active and serious, I say let's go for it, brother.
Absolutely.
Let's get some more involved too. See what we can do. I appreciate you, James.
Appreciate you Thank you very much, Andre and the rest.
You're welcome.
H is right here.
Yeah, we have more time.
In the deep
Probably
house.
next.
That's not where it goes.
Sorry?
Oh, is that someone in the background? Who was that? Oh, that
Yeah,
was Andre.
those are my grandbabies. We're putting this puzzle together, V Bennett.
Wow. Oh, as a
nice.
matter of fact, James, you got to stay right here, brother. Let me show you something. What she's talking about. Sorry to hold you, brother. Let me just do this.
No, it's no problem.
She is talking about one of our a product that anyone can get if they choose to, if they're interested in learning about Africa. Here we have a jigsaw puzzle that's just for you. It's for African descent. It's for anybody that wants to learn about Africa, the land, the nations, the towns, these kind of things. Yeah, you can actually pick it up. So I'll put that in the chat for people too. Anybody that's interested, and of course I'm gonna drop your link again too for people. James, any last words you want to say to folks before we log out, James?
I think I've said so much, but I mean, it was a pleasure really to also meet the rest and have this conversation. There's no particular solution. There's not one solution. I think there's myriads of them, and I think it's also equally important to have these parallels as such, and know what our people from the other side, kind of we can create some form of synergy. And do stuff together. I think that's quite important. And I mean, it's one step at a time. And we should embrace the spirit of Ubuntu. If we all would have that philosophy, the African philosophy of Ubuntu, I think we can really go far. We've been divided for many years. It's high time we knew that we shouldn't divide ourselves. The issues we've discussed, they're not going to, we'll discuss them again in the next 20, 30, 40, 100 years, probably. But the condition might be mitigated somehow. But we have to build that foundation now so that, our kids can at least have more of a better place than we left it. So I think...
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean... I appreciate the discussion, and this is how things start. They say 1,000 miles starts with one step.
Absolutely, James. Absolutely, and I look forward to making more steps with you, my brother, and more steps with you, Andrea, and everybody else out there. You got a taste of James Omolo, but I would encourage people to do research, read his book. It's in the chat, but his latest book is called The Beast, White Supremacy. And so if you want to know how white supremacy might work in different circumstances, especially here in Europe, you might want to pick up that book because it is real. And a lot of times we contextualize it in our own specific way, but it makes us stronger to see the other side of the coin, how it's working in another space, with our people. So I appreciate you, James, and I hope people follow up. And you're definitely going to be back. So
obviously,
yeah.
And for the hopefully I'll see you soon.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. And for the people out there that just might not happen to like this message, who cares? We got something for you too. Watch this. See you later.